Welcome back to the Red Web Superhero Talk Show with Brad West, Greg Burrow from Dragons Are Comic and Fantasy, and I'm Tasha Anderson. This week we are doing Bring in the Clones. We're talking about SpiderClones. Now I know the past 3 days was a lot to get through, but you got to remember we are literally talking 73, 83, 93, 2003, almost 40 years of Spider-Man continuity that has centered around clones. And so we tried to streamline it as best we could. I know a bunch of it was an info dump, but we hopefully have enough that, trust me, there are plenty of stories and plenty of interesting, fun sidelines and things that come from that on their own in main continuity. Today we're going to be talking about a alternate continuity, the Marvel MC2 universe, or Marvel Comics 2.
We're talking about several things. It's basically the Spider Girls.
Or
Spider Women, SpiderLadies.
Yes, we're going to be talking about Spider Women clones. But the main one that really is interesting, that has the biggest history and the biggest continuity, is the MC2 Spider-Girl.
Definitely.
It's definitely Spider-Girl. So we're going to talk about her first.
Tom DeFalco, Ron Friends, amazing stuff.
Now, as we mentioned before, Tom DeFalco was one of the main architects of the 90s Spider-Man clone. And if you remember from our episode on Tuesday, when we were talking about how part of the edict, the direction they were trying to go with the whole story in the first place, was to give Peter and Mary Jane a child and have them go off and live a happy life and have, Peter be married and have a domestic life. And they ended up nixing that in the end. First, they kidnapped the baby, but then they said it was stillborn, and then it's miscarriage, it was all this thing. So in the long run, they ended up not having the baby. In fact, we also talked about Aunt May dying, how it was one of the most emotionally impactful things I'd ever read in a comic. Well, eventually they undid that too. I'm not going to tell you how. It was convoluted. It was another stupid comic book thing that you're going to go, really?
Right, that doesn't matter in comics.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I'll let you read that one on your own. You'll find that one out on your own. But this is...
Well, surely it couldn't be as bad as making a deal with Mephisto.
It almost is. It almost is. You know what? I'm not gonna go there because it made me angry. It made me angry. It took the emotional weight of that story and made it go. You're like,
I mean,
what? It ruined it. It ruined. I've never wanted. Like, they've done some amazing stories with Aunt May since then, and I love a lot of. Like I said, Dan Slott was a great writer. He did such an amazing job with her, having her marry Jameson's father, which essentially made Jameson Peter's stepbrother. I mean, there was good stories. It was good. Modern May is good, but what they did to keep her, it was words, just words. Oh my God! I will tell them off camera and let them tell us later what they think about it. But regardless, needless to say, as you're all familiar with by now, because of the Disney Plus series What If, it's based on a long-running comic book that Marvel called What If, where they basically are like, hey, what would have happened if we'd have gone a different direction with this story?
And there's some amazing ones. If you haven't read the What Ifs, I highly suggest.
There's
one that's really hilarious. That is, what if the Marvel bullpen was the Fantastic Four? So you've got Stan Lee as Mr. Fantastic, Jack Kirby is the Thing.
My favorite to date is still, and I remember reading my uncle's copy, and I'm so sad I never managed to keep it, was he had the what if somebody else got bitten by the spider.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a whole page of just like different...
Oh, no, it was multiple stories.
Yeah.
It was actually multiple stories.
I remember because we had found that.
You did,
yes.
yes.
And what's really wonderful is they've actually released omnibus versions recently. I think they've released 3 volumes of it.
If you want to see the worst spider costume ever, Betty Brant as Spider-Woman.
Oh, man.
It's like, that's the joy of it.
It was so bad.
And also, believe it or not, there's actually a what if in the first run of What If, way back when, where what if Jane Foster was Thor? She finds the staff, the cane, and she becomes Thor instead of Donald Blake.
Lots of amazing stories there. But the one we're going to be talking about today is What If number 105, which was...
From the second What If series.
It's the second What If series. But it's got a long history in there, the What If series. Not quite as fun as the very short-lived Marvel WTF series,
Yeah.
which was just them making absurd things. You would like absurd for the sake of absurd. But anyway, Marvel What If 105. It came out when at the end of the 90s, mid to late 90s. It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't that far after.
Maybe 97.
So Marvel, the whole clone saga, the clone saga from the 90s, when it wrapped up, and by the time it was all said and done, and they put Peter back, and they got rid of Ben, and blah, 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 well, they did a what if. Remember how I told you they ended up not having the child, and Aunt May was dead? Well, we're like, what if we stuck with that? What if we had actually gone with them having a baby and keeping Aunt May as having passed on? And so what would have happened if they had a child and that child grew up? And this is where we get Spider-Girl, the Mayday Parker Spider-Girl.
Mayday Parker. Yeah.
And of course,
it's really amazing because actually it's still in continuity with the regular comics, because remember Mary Jane thought she had a stillborn baby. What happened was that the baby was actually kidnapped.
Correct.
And Kane rescued her. And brought her back, and so they raised the baby as Mayday Parker.
And Aunt May stayed dead, which meant that they, of course, named their newborn daughter after Aunt May, hence her being named Mayday Parker. And it was very popular. It actually launched a whole imprint. It was so popular, Marvel goes, what if we did this whole alternate universe?
Because it was set in the future a bit. Because
it was set in their future. It's now in our current.
Yeah.
Right.
It was basically like, it joins the story where Mayday Parker is 14 years old. She's in high school. She is the basketball star, and she starts developing her powers. Like in the basketball game, she does a slam dunk where she does a Spider-Man pose, basically, as she's slam dunking. And Peter and Mary Jane look at each other and we're like, oh, we may have to talk to her.
We have to talk about the birds and the bees and the spiders.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
it is super cute.
But the thing is, the whole story spins out of the Clone Saga as it would have originally had gone. Yeah. And it's really cool because Kane is a main character. He actually, to redeem himself after Ben's death, his way of redeeming himself is he goes off and finds the kidnapped baby and brings her back. Her costume even. Remember I was telling you for a while, Ben Reilly took over as Spider-Man in Sensational Spider-Man in his very cool modernized costume. Well, when they tell May about her heritage and everything, she finds her Uncle Ben, because, the clone was basically Spider-Man's brother. She calls him her Uncle Ben's costume, and she basically wears that modernized costume. That design carried over. Tom DeFalco, who was one of the main architects of the Clone Saga, he carries over, and it was an amazing series. I mean, it was so popular that they tried to cancel it
5 times.
5 times, and it still kept.
The writing campaigns and everything like that, they said, okay, fine. And they were the Marvel editor-in-chiefs and stuff were so sick of Spider-Girl, they tried multiple times to find ways to make it to where Spider-Girl could not exist. Mm-hmm. They actually, they created Aranya to replace Spider-Girl. And they actually, they did Brand New Day and said that broke up
she was
Mary
never
Jane.
born. She was never even conceived.
Yeah, because Mary Jane and
Peter
were never married, so there's no way she could exist. Mm-hmm. So that's how they finally killed the Spider-Girl title.
I haven't told Greg this part yet, but I got a secret I have to drop.
No! But anyways, are you talking about the new pop that there's a pop
No,
vinyl out there?
I'm talking about the current comic book. This is the same Spider. This is the same issue that Ben comes back as Spider-Man. You're gonna love this or hate it.
Yeah. I have to admit, in the Spider-Verse, Spider-Geddon, and the Web Warriors and all that kind of stuff, they brought her back.
Yes.
But she's very grim because her version of Peter Parker and Mary Jane were killed, murdered, and.
No, Mary Jane's alive. Mary Jane's still alive.
Is Mary? I remembered them both dying.
She lived. Okay, so in the actual
Spider-Verse,
they made Mayday continuity, the continuation of it, and they continued it, and she had a backup feature in Web Warriors. Okay. I love the Web Warriors series, and it was a whole backup feature. She had her. They continued her in the Web Warriors, and by the time it was said and done, there was one universe where Uncle Ben got bitten instead of Peter. He drops Peter off at the Science exhibit, and he sticks around and gets bitten instead. And Uncle Ben becomes Spider-Man. But his Peter ends up dying, and he becomes, because of the same way, he just reverses it. Well, when all is said and done, yes, Peter does die in the Spider-Verse storyline.
MC2.
Yeah, the MC2's Peter does die, but Mary Jane has had a baby. She's got Benjamin
Yeah,
Jr.
that was in the actual Spider-Girl series, which was really awesome.
The big thing with the whole Spider-Verse story was the way that they ended up defeating the Inheritors was they needed 3 spider totems that were unique to this universe, and that was Silk.
Yeah.
Because Silk was this is the only universe where Silk was bitten by the same spider. Cain, because Cain had taken on the identity of the Other, as I mentioned before, and this is the only universe where the Other continued to exist outside of Peter. And Benjamin, because it's the only universe where the baby was born with the powers. And the 3 of them were the ones who basically ended up defeating the Inheritors in the long run. So what ended up happening is by the time it was all done said, because NC2 Spider-Girl lost her Peter, that Uncle Ben decided to stick around and help raise Benji and filled in the gap in the family. So he remained behind.
Yeah,
and Mary Jane was still alive, and in the end, Mayday decided it was time to become Spider-Woman instead of Spider-Girl.
Yeah.
But Mary Jane did not die. Mary Jane survived.
But May was definitely darker.
Yes.
After Spider-Verse. So, and one of the things that I loved about the Spider-Girl series was that how positive she was. And she was very much a mix of Peter and Mary Jane. Because in the Spider-Girl books, she was actually very popular and all that kind of stuff.
She had Mary Jane's personality.
It was really hilarious because in the comics, she would actually be going and patrolling, and the female Avengers would go hunting for her so they could patrol with her because they wanted to hang out. Yeah, so different people American Dream and Stinger would actually go and hang out with her just so they could hang out with her.
Yeah,
and,
Stinger's a really cool, interesting, unique character in that if you've watched the MCU Ant-Man movies, the character of Hope Van Dyne does not exist in the main Marvel universe. She's actually the MC2 universe's version of Ant-Man and the Wasp's daughter. So they actually imported her from that universe. That's where she originated as. So I found that particularly interesting. That's why I remember when me and Greg first saw Ant-Man, and at the end it pops up and he goes, "Why are they giving Tom DeFalco credit on this? He didn't create Ant-Man." I'm like, "No, but he created Hope." And you're like, "Oh, that's right. She's from the MCU universe." So it's very cool. It's very cool that at least these writers and these creators got to do something with this. It wasn't a complete loss.
Well, I've been saying for a while now. I mean, like they've rebooted Spider-Man 3 times. Give us Spider-Girl. Mm-hmm. Seriously, because Spider-Girl is.
Might as well.
I mean, honestly, the Tom DeFalco is a freaking genius.
He's
and
great.
I loved everything he did in
Every
Spider-Girl.
con he's at, I get him to sign something.
Yeah, and Ron Friends did a great job with the art, and it's just,
But today we are talking about Clue.
Yes, clones. I'm sorry. But anyways, in Spider-Girl, there are multiple clones.
It is rife with clones.
We've talked about Kane saving Mayday Parker as a baby and bringing her back to the Parkers to be raised. But also, Mayday Parker had a clone. Because when she was kidnapped, they cloned her, but they mixed the DNA with a symbiote.
So her clone was half symbiote.
April is the clone, and she's got symbiote powers as well as...
Yep. Yeah. And at first they think they're going to be adversaries and she's going to be her Venom, but she actually ends up being her Ben. And another cool, not really clone, but definitely clone adjacent, is Dark Devil.
Yes.
Dark Devil is Ben Reilly's son from before. So somehow the love interest that was in the Ben Reilly comic books, who they're bringing back actually in the new Spider-Man Beyond story, but the love interest, she ended up having Ben's baby, and he has and Kane became his mentor, and he ends up having, I'm not going to tell you because it's super convoluted, but he basically ends up part Spider-Man, part Daredevil, part Ghost Rider.
Yes.
And he becomes Dark Devil.
Yes.
So Dark Devil was a cool character too. And it's got his own you know, I think it's there.
It's actually one of the more interesting characters from the MC2 universe. I loved the MC2 universe because there were so many interesting.
And he's more or less her cousin, and you know.
But he never tells her.
He never tells her. Now, Jessica Drew's son Gary does try to become the new Spider-Man, and so he's in there for a while. So there's like all kinds of really cool, fun stuff. And Aranya does grow up and become, Aranya. And it's fun. It was a cool comic book. I liked it. I haven't read as much as Greg did. He's got the whole collection, so it's really fun.
I got all the MC2 stuff. I mean,
he's storing them here for now in the hopes that one day I'll read them. But I've got so much to go through. It's its own long box.
But I'm gonna say this. I mean, there were so many interesting things and things that they released in that whole thing, because I mean, like, Wolverine actually has a daughter named Wild Thing, and guess who the mother is? Elektra.
Which actually confused me.
I was like, what? And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? Yeah, she wouldn't put up with Wolverine's stuff. She could keep him in line. I could see it. And you know, Wolverine loves the strong female hero characters, and he's actually really fallen for some darker ones, female characters too. I mean, Mariko,
yeah. He was married to Viper.
Yeah. So there's some really, you know, I could see it happening, you know, and it was really interesting. There was like one comic where they actually like they're actually going on a hunt together, where Wolverine and Wild Thing are going on a hunt together, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. We've talked about Stinger. Juggernaut had a son, and they called him J2.
Uh-huh.
And there was also American Dream, who was took over for Captain America, and she was it Sharon Carter?
I don't know. I was assuming it was Black Widow.
No.
Oh no, that's the one. That's the other cartoon, Avengers Next, where there is a version that Black Widow and Captain America have a son. In one continuity, but not this way. Yeah, I don't remember.
But I remember. I want to say it was like Sharon Carter.
Okay.
So it was.
It's
from
very
the
likely.
Carter. It was from the Carter.
It could only have been Sharon Carter. Yeah, because the only love interest that I remember him having in the comic books were Sharon Carter and Diamondback. So unless it was Diamondback.
No, but it was really cool because she had these little shields that she could like toss like.
Oh yeah.
Throwing stars and stuff.
Nice.
But yeah, she was really cool, and but they just had. I mean, there was like
looks like she's the niece of Sharon Carter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not as fun.
Okay.
But it was like so many different characters that were released for that MC2 universe. Like J. Jonah Jameson's grandson
became the Buzz.
The Buzz.
I liked him.
I love. There was so many.
It had its own sub imprint. They had that's what they called the.
But it was also really interesting because you could see what happened to a lot of these heroes. Like, you know, what would happen.
Franklin Richards grew up and started leading this Fantastic Five.
And it was hilarious because all the teenage girls fangirled over him so much that like May
they made him like a pop star. Yeah,
May has a poster of him on her wall.
Yeah,
and there was actually like moments where she totally fangirls around him, and he's like, you know. Because he wants to hang out with her too. Everybody wants to hang out with her. But the thing is she's a 14-year-old girl. No one knows she's a 14-year-old girl. But there was also like, you know, I mean, there was like tragedy with Franklin Richards and Sue Storm. They were trapped off in the negative verse or something like that. And like, you know, there was like Thing was missing an arm and like had a robotic arm. And
they took a lot. It was basically. Again, to tie this back into our clone story today, it took the groundwork that was laid in the clone saga, created this one if, and spun it off into its own little alternate future, and it was enough there to get this fully rich, realized entire universe on its own that still continues, like you said, all the way up to Spider-Verse and Spider-Geddon. It still crosses over. I mean, they've recently had, in the Spider-Geddon storyline, they had two versions of Peter. So, in one version of an alternate future, the Renew Your Vows storyline, which is another amazing alternate I like. It's where Peter and Mary have a second pregnancy, and this time Anna Parker is named after her Aunt Anna instead, is there and becomes Spiderling, and Peter and Mary, Peter creates a way to temporarily let Mary Jane borrow his power so long as they're together. So they go off as a family, and they train her to be Spider-Girl, or Spiderling, and everything. Aww. And in the Spider-Geddon storyline, they do this series called Spider-Girls, where Mayday gets to come over and meet this version of Mary Jane. And so she meets the daughter that could have been, and then of course Mayday meets the sister that she never had, and it's really cute. And they still continue to connect over the stories after that. And it was a really beautiful story.
Agreed.
With that, it was very interesting like that. Now, to continue on, we're gonna move away from Spider-Girl, but to continue on with our clone things, like Greg was talking about Wolverine. And Wolverine, especially with the daughter Wolverine has in this reality, we're going to talk about the pseudo-daughter he has in the main continuity. And as I mentioned earlier before, Wolverine was going to pop back up in here because of X-23. And we said, all of the clones. Laura Kinney, who of course is the basis for the character in the Logan movie, as you've seen, exists in the comic books. She was first created for the X-Men Evolutions
cartoon. She was in 2 episodes.
And she was popular enough that they spread her off into the comic book.
I actually like the X-Men Evolutions version of her better.
Yeah, the NYX version, eventually...
And the sad thing is Chris Yost, I believe, created her for X-Men Evolutions.
Again, tying into the clones, Chris Yost, who wrote the Scarlet Spider book.
And then he went back and then introduced her over in the Marvel Universe in the comics, but he made her darker. Because, of course, for television, you had to be more, so like she doesn't kill her mom in the X-Men Evolutions cartoon.
Right.
So I always wanted that. I had that hope that they would actually, she would find her mother again, and they would actually, have, a family, and, actually...
Right.
I thought that was a really cool dynamic. But, of course, in the comics, in order to escape, one of the things that the agency does, they have this scent marker that they mark on people, and that's, drives her crazy to where she has to kill that person. So, they use it on the mother and make her kill the mother. Which I hated. I hated that so much.
Well, I think we're going to revisit this an episode in the future, because like I said, this is Spider Clones this week.
Yes.
There's clones everywhere. We can, especially after last year with the whole Way of X and Swords of X and all the current comic books of X-Men, there's a whole different kind of clones. And not just more clones, but a whole different kind. It's even weirder.
So let's skip over to Spider.
We're gonna do X clones later.
Well, actually, Black Widow.
The reason that I want you to talk about, there's a connection here. You gotta stick with me. Okay. Why? Do you remember why it took them 23 times to get to the clone? Why she's number 23?
Well, there's multiple reasons, but the main reason is they actually mixed her DNA with the doctor and that carried her to term, and was her mother.
Okay.
So she's not a strict clone.
She's not a strict clone
of Logan.
But basically, she's a Y chromosome swap out.
Yeah.
She's a double X instead of a XY because that to make her stable. The reason this is important is because Ultimate Universe, the Ultimate Comics universe that they restarted in 2000s to basically get a new spin on everything, had its own clone saga. And the short and sweet of it is that Dr. Octopus starts not only does he clone Peter, he starts messing with it and tweaking with it. And just like the original Clone Saga, there was a degenerative aspect to it where they were unstable. Well, taking a cue from the X-23 storyline, when Brian Michael Bendis, who of course who would later on create the Miles Morales Spider-Man, when he was writing the Clone Saga for Ultimate comic books, he's like, let's see what happens if we do the same thing with Peter. And so what happened in that, the short and the sweet of it is that in the end, the only way to stabilize the cloning process was to remove the Y chromosome and make a female clone of Spider-Man. So this is the Ultimate Universe Spider-Woman, and she amuses me to no end, because the main thing about it is there are multiple clones. There's the tarantula, who is basically a Spider-Man clone with extra arms. There's the scorpion. For those of you who know your arachnology, is that scorpions are also arachnids, and they are very similar genetically to Spider-Man. Well, he gets tweaked up a little bit, and so it kind of changes him from a Spider-Man to a scorpion and gives him a scorpion tail. And then there's, of course, Spider-Woman. And the fun thing about this was two things that I think are really amusing. One, they all have the memory of being in love with Mary Jane. So, Ultimate Universe Spider-Woman has feelings for Mary Jane. And two is Johnny Storm is living with Peter at the time that she comes around and is hitting on her and falls in love with her before he finds out that she's a female version of his best friend.
Wow.
And he has conflicted feelings about this.
Wow.
It's very, very amusing. In the end, though, she's the only one that survives. And she's a really cool character because she actually helps usher in Miles Morales. So after the death of Spider-Man, Peter Parker in the Ultimate Universe, when Miles comes along, and his story is very similar to what's in the movie, he feels bad because he gets bitten by another spider that's similar to the one that created Peter, but he's afraid to use his powers, and he's there to witness Spider-Man die. And so he eventually comes to decide he wants to... So he goes and buys a store-bought version of the costume. And, of course, Spider-Woman, she's like, who are you to go around where she basically kind of gets on to him about it. But when she starts to come around to him, she's the one who convinces him to be a hero. She even takes him to S.H.I.E.L.D., and she's the one who makes him his costume. So that he can have it. She's like, okay, fine. I will accept you being the new Spider-Man. I'm going to encourage you to be the new Spider-Man. But you need your own costume, because you can't be running around in the dead Spider-Man's costume. It's just disrespectful. Mm-hmm. And so we move on from that. And when all is said and done, she ends up joining S.H.I.E.L.D., and they eventually make her the new Black Widow. And so she becomes the Ultimate Universe's Black Widow and crosses over into storylines too. So that's why I was saying it's kind of an interesting tie-in, because the whole concept of what if Wolverine were cloned as a female, they did it with Spider-Man, but to much comical effect. I found very, very fun and interesting. Right. And then that leaves us with one more. See, I've got a progression. It looks like I've just got this like stream of consciousness vomiting, but I actually have a plan. So now we get into Black Widow, and this is my last fun little thing. As everybody knows from the movie even, and from the movie universe, the Black Room, one of the things they do to make them supposedly more ruthless and keep them from getting distracted by their women feelings is they sterilize all of the assassins that they train in the Black Room, and it's an ongoing thing. And if you watch the Black Widow movie, of course, you know they do this. And talk about making people uncomfortable. I love the scene where they do this with the Red Guardian. That was just like
that was hysterical.
Well, in the comic book, at one point, another Russian organization decides that Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, is like the greatest there ever was, and they want a whole army of just her. So they clone her, but they clone one that is complete so that she can give birth. And then they harvest her eggs to bond with cloned Peter Parker DNA. So there's a version of Black Widow's clone in the Marvel Universe that basically gave birth to 123 half Spider-Man babies.
Yeah, it is horrifying.
I'm still trying to find out, and this is where I'm letting you down to my audience. I'm still trying to figure out and investigate what happened. Somewhere, they didn't say they killed them or anything. Somewhere in the Marvel Universe,
gone.
There's 123 half Black Widow, half Spider-Man clone babies. And I want to know. If you know, please tell me. Give me an issue number. Help me find this, please. Because I'm dying to know what happened to the 123 half Black Widows.
I mean, apparently there are some just wild-eyed people in the corner of the internet. Because last time you asked me to look that up, like that was the second answer. And it's just 3 straight articles of, oh my God, have you ever heard of the thing where they had a clone give birth to 123 babies? Like, there are just people on street corners with the end is nigh signs going, no, this exists, I swear.
It's a thing. It's a thing. So,
yeah.
Anyway, that was our SpiderClones Part 4. Clone Sagas, the Spider Women's. So thank you for joining us today. Make sure you like, subscribe.
Yes.
Read Spider-Girl. Read all of this.
By the way, they have released omnibuses recently. I think they've got 3 volumes out, and it goes way further than that, but the 3 volumes really hit some of the really great stuff that happened in that series. Each book has at least one of the great storylines from that run.
Yep.
I think the first volume, obviously, you get the beginning, and you get a lot of the
origins.
I don't want to tell you.
No,
but anyways, so, and then the second one I think is, well, one of them has the Super Skrull stuff, which is really great, and then another one has the Sinister Six stuff, which is like, oh my god, that storyline is amazing.
Oh, and the other thing that I was going to tell you about that just came out one more day. I'm sorry. I have to. So anyway, we talk about One More Day all the time, and it was just revealed in the Spider-Man comics, and this is where the big twist was at the end. Remember how I told you that I was really on board with Nick Spencer because I'm like, okay, he's doing a good job. He's not as good as Dan Slott, but he's not doing as bad.
Well, you were also telling me that he's trying to totally undo all
Okay, and so anyway, Nick Spencer, if you don't know, came under much criticism because the internet kind of just like blew up over the Nazi Captain America storyline from the Secret Empire, and so
I was one of them.
He followed up from that to take over Spider-Man. So I'll admit I was a little worried, and I'm like, oh, he's trying to, and for all intents and purposes, it really did look like he was trying to fix One More Day, and I was so ready for him to fix One More Day. He kind of did, but he kind of didn't. He put this screw into it that really just got me like going, because he revealed that Mephisto was playing the long game. Hold on. This is what I told you. I want you to watch Craig's face as I tell him this. That the whole reason that Mephisto made the deal with Peter was because he found out that Mayday was destined to kill him for reals. That the person who was going to actually finally defeat him would be Peter and Mary Jane's child. And so he undid their marriage for the express purpose of keeping Mayday from being born. So that is how Amazing Spider-Man number 74 on shelves right now. Go read it. It's got a lot going on.
Yeah, no, that is I'm sorry, what? But also, we didn't run this by one more person.
I had to do it live for you because I just had
but hear me out. What if this is a bad idea?
So if you didn't hate One More Day enough, Nick Spencer, thank you for.
Well, the thing I hate about One More Day, Peter Parker would never make a deal with the devil.
He would not.
That's so against his character.
He would not.
It is a writer saying, I have no idea how to get out of this situation. I'm going to do this.
Well, you know what?
I'm not going to pay attention to his character.
He could have gone back in time and replaced himself.
Right? It's like, or he could ask his
I hate when writers don't pay attention to character.
It's like, or he could ask his wizard friend to undo the stuff he did. That would be crazy.
Yeah, it would be crazy. So thank you for joining us on the Red Web and our talk about clones today. We got one more for you. We're gonna get you tomorrow, and I promise it will be a lot quicker and swifter.
Miles Morales.
We're gonna leave it on an up note because this is a positive one. So like, subscribe, follow, go to bradtheredweb.com and keep up with us on the Kaiju Live media page, etc., etc. And look out for our Patreon later this year. We love you, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, bye-bye.
Ooh, they're coming for us. They didn't like that last part about the... They're coming for Nick. They're coming for you, Nick Spencer. Bye-bye.